Welcome to the Not Old Better Show, the show covering all things health, wellness, culture, and more. The show for all of us who aren't old, we're better. Each week, we'll interview superstars, experts, and ordinary people doing extraordinary things, all related to this wonderful experience of getting better, not older. Now, here's your host, the award-winning Paul Vogelzang.
Welcome to the Not Old Better Show on radio and podcast. I'm Paul Vogelzang, and today we embark on a captivating journey into the realm of psychedelic medicine. In the next half hour, we will be exploring the compelling world of Meryl Davids Landau's award-winning research and work on this subject. Today's episode is brought to you by WildHealth and Shipstation. Our focus today lies on its burgeoning role in mental health. Specifically, we are exploring the profound impact, especially on the senior community, of psychedelic medicine. The subject at hand is both revolutionary and deeply human. It merges cutting-edge science with ancient wisdom. At the core of our discussion is the use of substances like LSD, psilocybin, and ketamine. These are not just chemicals, they are keys unlocking new doors in brain science. Meryl Davids Landau's work on psychedelic medicine offers hope, especially for those grappling with anxiety, depression, and the existential challenges of aging. Meryl Davids Landau has been reporting on this subject, and we have her today. She'll be our guide through this uncharted territory and will help us understand what she's learned and has been reporting on for the past year to year and a half. We will have links so that our audience can find out more about Meryl Davids Landau's work. But Meryl Davids Landau is a visionary writer. She brings clarity to complex science topics. Her insights shed light on how psychedelics are transforming therapy. Together, we will uncover the science behind these treatments. We will delve into the experiences of those who have journeyed through psychedelic therapy. And today, with Meryl Davids Landau, we will address the critical question: who will navigate this new frontier of medicine? Join us. Expand your understanding of how the older generation can find solace and healing. This episode promises enlightenment, compassion, and a glimpse into the future of wellness. Please join me in welcoming back to the Not Old Better Show, writer, author Meryl Davids Landau. Meryl Davids Landau, welcome back to the program.
Thank you. It's so great to be here again.
It's so great to talk to you again. We've talked a couple of times. Really, you're becoming an audience favorite, and we're going to talk about a subject today that you've written so thoroughly about. And I've had a chance to read your articles, one recently in the Washington Post and then three from the National Geographic. We'll make sure that our audience can find those. But the subject of psychedelics is, I think, starting to really take hold in a lot of places, and you're finding that. But I think in my audience, there may be some unfamiliarity. So why don't you give us a little bit of an overview of psychedelic medicine and how it's emerging in healthcare, especially for those of us who might be unfamiliar with it specifically.
Right, and I think for your audience, of which I am a member, there's kind of two trains of thoughts on psychedelics. One are the people who remember, the LSD, tuning in, turning on, 60s, and then slightly younger people who remember all of the just say no and drugs will fry your brains, kind of, very anti-psychedelic messaging. But the third messaging, which is coming out now, is that the research has started back up on psychedelics. There was a fair amount of preliminary research done in the 1950s, which was starting to show that certain psychedelic drugs were really beneficial for quite a number of mental health conditions. And then when the drug was rescheduled, when all these drugs were rescheduled as Schedule 1, making them the most restricted drugs in the U.S. and subsequently in most countries around the world, all that research came to a halt. So it was only in the last, 10 years started, but really in the last 5 years or so, that a number of these compounds have been studied in the modern era, with using contemporary science of, double-blind, clinically controlled studies that are really starting to, again, show that some of these compounds are really beneficial when done in the right setting with all of the caveats you and I am sure will discuss. It's not the same thing as going to a rave and taking some of these drugs. But when done in a controlled, health-oriented setting, can be really powerful for PTSD, for depression, for substance abuse, eating disorders. I mean, the list is long and growing of things that are being found to potentially benefit. Most of the research for most of the compounds are still in the early stages, still small studies, so a lot more research needs to happen. But the research that has been published to date is quite intriguing, and that's why I keep writing about it.
Well, and congratulations on your work, because it's remarkable. The research is just really exceptional, and I do think it's something that we need to pay attention to. Which is leading? Are we ahead on the science? Are we ahead on the perception? What needs to catch up with what, so that we kind of come together at the right place and the right time, so that psychedelics can be both administered correctly, researched properly, but then applied in the proper settings to the right individuals? How is that kind of merging?
So I think from the general public's perception, both of those things are happening. Some people have their excitement among some people have gotten ahead of the science, but among other people, again, those who came of age or remember the 80s with all of the really intensive anti-drug messaging, might be afraid of psychedelics. I read one study recently where they were talking to veterans about psychedelics, because veterans is a particular audience with a high rates of PTSD and suicide, where some of these drugs could potentially be very powerful. And, some of them said they worry that, it could damage their brain, or they might lose their mind. I mean, these are messages that were pounded into people's heads during the anti-drug crusade. So I think, some people are overly afraid of them and some people are overly excited about them. And the middle of continuing to watch the science, waiting to see what the FDA does. The first drug, the first psychedelic called MDMA, which is known on the street world or in clubs as ecstasy or Molly. But when, given in controlled doses in controlled settings, has been shown to be very helpful for PTSD. That drug was submitted to the FDA last month. And so if the FDA accepts the application as complete, which is not a guarantee, the MDMA could become the first psychedelic potentially to be approved in this country in decades. So again, it's, the reality is it's not a panacea, but it's not the horrible drug it's been made out to be, and the research is very intriguing and very promising.
Well, in fact, and you really are so prescient here. You've written in National Geographic in November of 2023 about brain injury and how LSD can open the mind literally, and ecstasy offers this unique treatment plan and can overcome some of these brain injuries, and do so with some science-backed research. So this is really, it's something that's coming together pretty quickly. And I would imagine that in 2024, we're going to see more of this kind of science, and it's going to impact a wider swath of individuals. But you spent some time writing on the subject of end-of-life cancer patients too, and that's going to bring me to my question. How do some of these substances, psilocybins, how does psilocybin help and aid in end-of-life cancer patients? Because there's some fear reduction, some anxiety elimination, and in particular, you actually studied a Canadian therapy group to provide some of this research.
Yeah, so that was my recent article in the Washington Post, and it was based on a program that Canada has started a couple of years ago that they've kind of ramped up a little bit, where they're allowing people who have a terminal diagnosis or other very serious health condition to be able to get psilocybin, which is the ingredient in magic mushrooms, the psychedelic ingredient in magic mushrooms. They're allowing people in the group to get access to psychedelic therapy because, if somebody tells you you have stage 4 cancer spread throughout your body, you still could have months or years to live, but it's very hard to live happily knowing that you have stage 4 cancer that's going to kill you. So a lot of people who have a terminal diagnosis have a lot of anxiety, a lot of depression, which is completely understandable, but it impacts their ability to be able to really live fully for whatever amount of time they have left. And so there's a program in Vancouver Island in British Columbia called Roots to Thrive, which was taking advantage of this Canadian program and doing group psychedelic with psilocybin, which involves therapy sessions before, and then one psilocybin session, and then psychotherapy sessions afterwards to kind of integrate and process what went on. And I was given access to 2 people who were in that program, both of whom have stage 4 cancer, who allowed me to really follow their progress, starting the months before and then going through their psychedelic session and then in the months after. And it really did make a difference, a huge difference to both of them. For one of the people named Brian, who's featured in my article, he had a fair amount of anxiety. He was a very calm person naturally, but he had a lot of anxiety that he felt was really interfering with his ability to live out the remaining time of his life. And the psychedelics really helped to calm that anxiety. And for the other woman who I spoke to at length named Kat, she really used the psychedelics to improve her own mental health in terms of recognizing what's important to her life, recognizing that it was important to her to kind of stand up for herself and not just be a doormat and put other people first. And all of these things are bringing her a lot more joy while she's still here living with her stage 4 cancer. And it also potentially helps people be less afraid of dying. This is something the literature has shown. There have been several studies where they've given psilocybin to people with end of life and really studied them closely. And because people have kind of an experience on the psychedelic where they feel connected to something larger than themselves, connected to other people, connected to the universe, connected to God. People describe it in different ways. And it's kind of similar, I think, to what some people experience during deep meditation. But you really come to a sense that I'm not just my limited mind and body. And if you're facing death, I think, the research is showing that can be very helpful to have that feeling. Because if you're more than your mind and body, then if you die, you're still going to be something. There's still going to be something there after the end. And so that can help make people less afraid of death. And that's what the 2 people, Brian and Kat, who I spoke to at length for the Washington Post piece, that's how they felt, that it really did make them a little bit less afraid of dying.
I really got that from the piece in the Washington Post, that Brian in particular, he's an outdoors person. He wanted to do some fishing. He wanted to see his grown children, grandsons, spend time with friends. It seemed to be what I might call palliative care at that point. It was anxiety reducing, and it gave him kind of this sense that he could still do these things and he didn't have to focus on the pain.
Yes. And some of the doctors who are affiliated with this program are palliative care doctors because they recognize that there's a limited amount of tools that they have to work with. And the psychedelics is potentially proven to be another very valuable tool. One of the doctors, this is not in my article because there was just so much information, I couldn't include everything, but one of the doctors who's involved with that program got involved because a patient of hers was a young mother in her 30s dying of cancer. She was, beside herself, not only with emotional pain, but with physical pain that was springing from the emotional pain. And the palliative care doctor who I interviewed really found there was nothing that she could give the person that was making any kind of a difference. And so she helped get the patient access to the psilocybin through this Health Canada waiver program. And after the woman had her psychedelic experience, she was completely transformed. I mean, the way this doctor was describing it to me was, she was sitting up and getting up and having a little bit of a life, which she was completely not having before. And so between that amount of time until her death, she was able to be much calmer, more joyful, and happier with her life. And that's what you want out of palliative care. That was the same with Brian, who did pass away in early December. And between the time he did the psychedelic in August and December, he described himself as being much more present, much more joyful, more connected to people. So that's really huge. Again, the literature is small in terms of the number of people who have been studied. And so these drugs do need to be studied more in depth to make sure. I mean, I think people who have a terminal diagnosis, and especially if they're really, really towards the end of their life, the harm, the benefits versus harm question, I think, there's less harm that can be done. But certainly within other groups of people, it's not 100% clear yet because of, the amount of studies that have been done on psilocybin and LSD, and some of the others are small. With MDMA, there's the most amount of research, and that's why they've submitted it to the FDA for approval. But, you do have to be careful to balance what could be the potential harms versus the benefits physically.
We'll be right back with guest Meryl Davids Landau, and our subject today, Meryl's award-winning work on psychedelic medicine. We talk a lot about health here on the show. We talk about fitness, we talk about well-being, etc. And people constantly ask me, which are the best beneficial supplements, or what's the best diet and exercise regimen for any number of issues? And while I try to provide as many useful tools here on the show as possible, at the end of the day, we know, and we need to really embrace this, that health is not one size fits all. Introducing our sponsor, WildHealth, who offers personalized healthcare through a proactive and preventative approach called precision medicine. WildHealth isn't just another health trend. It's a revolution in personalized wellness. They use your unique genetics, lifestyle, biometrics to pinpoint exactly what your body needs. This means the right nutrition, exercise, and sleep specifically for you, not the masses. If stress is your battle, sometimes that's the case for me, know that you're not alone. Half of WildHealth's patients have improved their stress hormone levels with tailored health plans. This is the precision medicine that I mentioned at its best, and it works. Health guru Ben Greenfield's words, they ring true to me. WildHealth is set to change the world. If that doesn't spark your curiosity, well, what will? WildHealth's approach goes beyond quick fixes. They craft lifestyle-first plans aimed at your long-term health and vitality. My personal experience, their insights were invaluable in giving me clarity on my own health journey as I age. And remember, WildHealth is just a click away with their full virtual service across the United States, making your health their priority. Whether you have a specific health goal like weight loss, body composition, or improved energy, or broadly want to optimize your health and prevent disease, WildHealth tailors a care plan with lifestyle-first interventions rather than pills and prescriptions. In the simplest sense, all of this helps you age, helps you live longer, and my own report was eye-opening and helpful in guiding my own individualized care plan. WildHealth is generously extending Not Old Better Show listeners 20% off the cost of membership with code NOB. Head over to wildhealth.com/NOB and use code NOB at checkout. All of this will be in our show notes, but make this commitment to yourself and start taking control of your health today at wildhealth.com/NOB. Just one more quick message from our sponsor today, ShipStation, and then we will be right back with our episode on psychedelic medicine with award-winning writer Meryl Davids Landau. Ever found yourself at the checkout only to balk at the shipping cost and speed? You're not alone there. That's why I switched to ShipStation, and it's been a game changer for our business. My wife and I own a dance studio in addition to being in business for myself here on my radio show and podcast, and so we are all too familiar with shipping costs. I'll tell you this, ShipStation has been a godsend. It's a seamless experience that's both affordable to us and it's super efficient to all of you, our customers, ensuring that any of our orders are managed in a single dashboard that's a breeze to navigate. I mean, this just makes it so simple. From my personal experience, I went for it with the ShipStation free trial and quick setup that's so easy. It allows you to try everything out before you commit or get started right away. And in so doing, I have slashed our shipping costs dramatically. We're talking discounts of up to 89% off standard rates from USPS and UPS. This isn't just about savings, though. It's about passing some value on to our customers and staying competitive. So I mentioned the dashboard. It is so easy to set everything up. The automation part of this is right there at your fingertips with ShipStation. You set it up once and you just watch it as it manages orders, it prints labels, and it sends delivery notifications automatically to your customers. And there's unmatched affordability. You will see the costs just get cut right before your eyes without cutting corners. ShipStation offers discounted rates that significantly undercut standard shipping prices, making it the smart financial choice for any of your online businesses. And, you know, as we're getting a little bit older, some of these tools really, really matter. So does the community. You are going to be working with a proven growth partner. You're joining a community of over 130,000 customers that have expanded their e-commerce ventures with ShipStation. Plus, with a customer retention rate that sees 98% of users staying beyond a year, you know you are in trusted company. Ready to streamline your shipping costs and save big? Well, use promo code NOB for a free 60-day trial at ShipStation.com. Discover why ShipStation is the shipping partner you'll want for life. Check it out. All of this will be in our show notes. And now back with our featured guest today, award-winning writer Meryl Davids Landau, on the subject of psychedelic medicine. Meryl Davids Landau is our guest, is a returning guest to the program, and is an award-winning writer, has written a multi-piece, I think it's just a wonderful collection of updates, I think, about this subject, new research that you've done on the subject of psychedelics, which we're talking about today. I wonder if you'll tell us a little bit about some of the regulatory issues that surround psychedelics. Where do people go to, get this treatment? How available is it? What kinds of things are they going to face when they, request this or try to learn more about it, and whether they can receive this kind of treatment?
So in the United States and in most countries around the world, psychedelic drugs are still not legal. And so most people in the U.S. who have taken psychedelics have either done it underground, they call it, because when the drugs were made illegal in 1970, there were some people who had been using it therapeutically with their patients who illegally continued to do so and to train other people. And so there are a fair number of people in this country who will do psychedelics with you in a safe way, but it's not a legal way. In some other countries, psychedelics are legal, and so there are groups, including veteran groups, which I'm writing about currently, who are taking groups of people to other countries for retreats in Mexico, in Jamaica, in Peru, where some of the different drugs are legal, and they're having the experience there. And then Oregon passed a measure in 2020 legalizing psilocybin mushrooms. They took about 2 years to set up the regulations and to certify the labs that are growing the mushrooms and the people who are administering. So only in the past 6 months or so have they started actually, people have actually started having psilocybin therapy in Oregon. But while it's legal in Oregon, and Colorado also passed regulation legalizing it, although they haven't finished setting up the apparatus yet, so you can't go to Colorado yet for it. It's still illegal federally, which means the federal government, kind of similar to cannabis, the federal government could come in at any time and arrest people or create problems for people using or providing psychedelics. So until it's legalized federally, which some people have been advocating for some time, it's still a wait and see. But if the FDA approves the MDMA that's been submitted, that would be the first psychedelic that could be offered more widely by doctors, by therapists, by people who have been trained. And there are a number of training programs that are already training therapists and others how to facilitate psilocybin therapy, because it's very specific. It's different from either regular psychotherapy, or it's very different from going to your doctor and getting a prescription for an antidepressant. The drug experience itself can last, 5 to 10 hours. And you need a therapist there with you the whole time. So the amount of resources that are involved in the training that people need, is definitely going to be something to watch. But there are people currently being trained, and if the FDA does approve MDMA, then people would be able to go to their therapist potentially, or go to a trained therapist and have MDMA facilitated psychotherapy, especially to help with PTSD, where the research is the strongest.
And you say in your one of your Nat Geo articles, that the demand for these trained professionals is becoming urgent, and the training. It was interesting to me because I think of psychiatric training, psychological training, but this is slightly different. The training that you might offer someone during their experience is perhaps to make them feel safe, to be soothing. Maybe describe that a little bit to our audience, how that part of it works and how important it is.
Yeah, and I do want to say the demand is expected to be very robust and outstrip the supply of trained people, because it's not legalized yet.
So once that's
the demand is really only happening in Oregon at the moment, and even there, demand is outstripping. I've heard they have a wait list of thousands of people who want this service. So, the training is very different. For one article that I did for National Geographic, where I looked into the training programs and people who are doing them, a psychiatrist said to me, this is not what we're used to providing. We're used to providing a medication, and then people take it and they go home, and then over the course of months they get better and they come back and we tweak it. This is really a merging of medication and psychotherapy in a way that we haven't seen in our medical system before. And so the training really is a new kind of training that is being created. And when we talk about the regulatory issues and the safety issues, there's one more drug that I do need to mention, and that's ketamine. Ketamine is not ketamine is not considered really a psychedelic or a true psychedelic, because it's a drug that's an anesthesia that does have some psychedelic-like properties in the short term. It lasts about a half an hour compared to these other drugs, which last, as I said, 5 to 10 hours. But a lot of places are starting to advertise that they offer psychedelic-assisted therapy because they are offering ketamine. So if you're outside of Oregon and you see a place advertising psychedelic-assisted therapy, they aren't using a true psychedelic. They are using ketamine. And ketamine can be valuable for people. There's a small body of research because it was approved as an anesthesia. It's already on the market. Doctors and psychiatrists and others can get it. And so there wasn't the impetus to do a lot of research for its mental health benefits or its potential mental health benefits. But a lot of places are advertising it and using it well beyond safety measures that the FDA would like to see, or well beyond what the research has shown it could be beneficial for. So I think with ketamine, it really is a buyer beware situation. Mm-hmm. If somebody has severe depression, if somebody has suicidal thinking, ketamine could potentially be helpful for them, but you really need to make sure you're doing it in a place that takes safety seriously and that takes follow-up psychotherapy seriously, so that it's not, some places, even some like wellness spas are starting to offer ketamine. Personally, I think that's really scary. And telehealth, some places are offering, they'll do telehealth and send it to you at home, and you can just take the oral version at home by yourself, which is also very scary. And the FDA recently came out with a warning against that.
It seems to be a bit lax with some of its use and even availability and kind of promotion behind it.
Yes, because it's a cheap drug, because it's generic, it's been around a long time. So really a lot of places can get it, just set up a shingle and call themselves a psychedelic therapy setting. And because there is a lot of interest in psychedelics, they're kind of riding those coattails. Because like I said, ketamine's not even really a psychedelic. It just can make people have that kind of out-of-body sensation for a period of time. So,
well, interestingly, Brian Mayer was 62, featured in your Washington Post article, suffering from prostate cancer, advanced stages of prostate cancer. So my next question really goes to kind of audience demographics, and really most of my audience is 60 plus. I wonder if you saw a particular distinction in some of the research that you did about who's taking some of these medications, particularly as they become a little bit more mainstream. What might develop for elderly in use of some of these medications?
So whether people who are older have a different response to the drug than people who are younger is something, again, entirely unresearched. That needs research. Whether there are more dangers in people who are older is something that has not been researched, because most of the studies have been small and haven't really broken it out to that degree. So I do think people will need to be careful. Even if it's legalized, people will need to be careful and wait for more aftermarket research in order to really see if you have certain medical conditions or physical conditions, or if you are a lot older, potentially, there could be risks involved that aren't known at this point. But in terms of if psychedelics does prove helpful for a lot of mental health conditions that older people could certainly have, depression is high in older people, PTSD in, older veterans is still fairly high, and also in other people who have other kinds of trauma in their life. And also, as you mentioned before, in one of my articles, I looked at psychedelic research for brain diseases. So that's not mental health conditions, but, people are looking into potentially would it help Parkinson's, and would it help a traumatic brain injury that somebody got from a car accident or from something. And again, the very early preliminary research is pretty promising that potentially it could help. It could help with these, because it's exactly how psychedelics work in the brain is still being researched. But what's kind of becoming clear is that it really helps the brain expand, not physically expand, but the brain gets pretty set. And psychedelics seem to kind of reopen learning windows and brain growth windows that were previously closed because you reach a certain age. I mean, all of us can think of in terms of windows. If you're trying to learn a second language, right? If you're a kid, you can pick it up very quickly. But by the time you're past your teens, that language window kind of starts to shut. And so if you try to pick up that second language when you're much older, it's much harder. And it seems that psychedelics may help open those windows for longer, reopen those windows that had been closed. And so stroke victims is a particular area of interesting research, because there, right after the stroke, some of those windows do reopen again, but then they close. So that's why people tend to get whatever benefits they're going to get from rehab after a stroke tend to last only like within 6 months. And then after that, it's very hard to have further improvements. But perhaps psychedelics could open that window for longer. And then a person could potentially have more opportunity to regain some of the function they lost. But again, that's all in early research, and we don't really know how that will play out in people when larger numbers of people are studied.
It all sounds at least very promising, but you used the term just a moment ago in respect to ketamine, patient beware, buyer beware. And so starting with your articles, which offer just a very thorough review of where things stand currently and some of the risks, and as well as the benefits of all of this, where else should families go when considering psychedelic therapy? What other places should they begin their research to find out more about this and how it might apply to them and their family members?
Well, I think if the drugs do get approved federally, then there probably will be pretty good information on government websites looking at, how the drug should safely be used and what, its potential. If the FDA does approve MDMA, it does so with restrictions, that it has to be offered, with a therapist in the room. It has to be offered along with therapy before and after. I mean, that's an unknown how it would be approved. Mm-hmm. But certainly people should not be taking information that they find online on, Twitter and even on some podcasts where there are people who are really strong advocates for psychedelics. Mm-hmm. You have to be careful not to take that information as the last word. I think it's very important to seek out research or articles that are based on the research that really kind of consider all of it. Because, there are people who've been advocating for psychedelics to be legalized for decades, even before the research showing this round of research showing the promise medically has been available. And so you do have to be careful with some of the proselytizers or maybe playing down potential risks or overhyping what is known so far about the benefits.
Yeah, you referenced, you didn't mention, but the name that I recall from long ago was Timothy Leary as being someone who was almost a zealot about the subject. Final question for you, Meryl Davids Landau. I wonder if you'd tell us briefly about what you researched in terms of the future of psychedelic medicine. The terms are good. It's really great to hear you talk through all of this and especially the training needed and how we need to be more aware. One of the terms that I found outside of some of the research that I was doing around this interview with you is the term of microdosing. What does that mean, and how does that kind of fit into the future of psychedelic medicine? Maybe leave us with that.
So microdosing is taking very small amounts, typically of LSD, but could be of other psychedelics, so that you maybe feel a little bit of the drug, but you don't have the full-on I can't function because I'm so busy looking at the beautiful sky for the next 10 hours kind of reaction that people might get under certain psychedelics. Other psychedelics, by the way, might have really intensively negative experiences. I spoke to someone for a different article that I'm writing who used ayahuasca, which is a drug used primarily in South America, where you vomit a lot and sweat a lot, and it's not a very pleasant experience to be on the drug, but potentially has benefits afterwards. But even the drugs that have very positive experiences, can take a lot out of your life. You need the whole day. And so microdosing is something that a lot of people have kind of drawn to, and the numbers of people who are microdosing is up substantially in recent years, where people claim it helps them with their productivity or with their mood, but they don't. But they can go back. They can go on with their regular life. It's not impacting your life the way taking a high dose of the drug is. The amount of research that's been done on microdosing is almost none. So, so I think a lot of people are going on the word of their friend or their cousin who tells them how great microdosing is, and it may be that it's really helpful for people. Some people think that the benefits of microdosing are more because people believe it's going to be helpful for them. And so, the placebo effect, they call it, that you're taking the drug and you think it's going to be beneficial. But there's probably less risk of taking a microdose because you're not taking such a high dose, but you are taking it over a long period of time. So whether that has particular health, yes. So whether that has a negative impact on a person's health is really a big unknown. So with all of this, there's a lot of great promise out there with psychedelics, but a lot of it still remains to be studied and proven to be safe and effective.
Meryl Davids Landau, it is so good to talk to you. I hope that you'll come back. We are developing a nice conversation, you and I really appreciate your time. But this, as it becomes more mainstream, as we learn more about it, as you're doing additional work around this, we'd love to have you back. We will provide links, just as we've done previously with your excellent work, but in particular, we want to cite the Washington Post article, the National Geographic articles, plural, that you've written, all the great stuff that you're doing. Congratulations on this work. It's so helpful, and I think our audience of older adults really, as they consider psychedelic therapy, they need to do so with their eyes open, and, as you say, patient beware. And Meryl Davids Landau has been so helpful in giving us some of these risks and benefits. But thank you, Meryl. Good to talk to you. Hope the rest of your day is well. And please do come back.
Thanks, Paul. It's great talking to you as well.
My thanks to our sponsors today, WildHealth and ShipStation. Please support our sponsors as they, in turn, support the show. My thanks to Meryl Davids Landau, especially grateful for her work in the realm of psychedelic medicine. Thank you so much, Meryl, again. Please check out our links for more information about Meryl Davids Landau's work and her excellent reporting on the subject of psychedelic medicine. My thanks to you, our wonderful audience on radio and podcast. Please be well. Be safe. Remember, let's talk about better. The Not Old Better Show. Thanks, everybody. We will see you next week.